Love Beyond Wealth. Part 1. The Village and the Boy. In a quiet village far away from the noise of the city, life moved with the rhythm of the sun. The morning began with the sound of birds, the soft rustle of leaves, and the voices of farmers heading toward their fields before the heat of the day took over. The roads were muddy in the rainy season, dusty in the dry months, and full of memories of people who had lived there for generations. It was a place where everyone knew each other, where everyone's problems were shared, and where happiness often came in small, simple moments. Among the people of that village lived a young man named Arif. Arif was a farmer, but not just any farmer. He was the kind of man who carried his pain quietly. He was poor and everyone in the village knew it. He lived in a small broken house near the edge of the village, where the roof leaked when it rained and the walls trembled when strong wind passed through the fields. His father had passed away years ago, leaving behind a tiny patch of land, a few old tools, and a burden that Arif had been carrying ever since. His mother had died when he was still a boy. Since then, life had taught him to depend only on himself. Every morning, Arif woke up before sunrise. He would wash his face with cold water from a clay pot, eat a little rice if there was any left from the night before, and then walk toward the fields. He worked under the hot sun for hours, sometimes from morning until evening, with very little rest. His hands were rough from labor. His clothes were faded and old. His sandals were almost broken. But his eyes still carried something that poverty could not destroy. They carried hope. Arif was not bitter. He did not hate the world. He did not complain about what life had taken from him. Instead, he believed that hard work and honesty could one day change his destiny. He believed that a man might be poor today, but still have the right to dream about tomorrow. People in the village respected him. They trusted him because he was kind, gentle, and dependable. If someone needed help carrying grain, Arif would be there. If an old woman needed water from the well, Arif would bring it. If a child had lost something in the field, Arif would search for it until he found it. He never expected reward. He only believed that goodness was not wasted. Still, there were nights when his heart became heavy. On those nights, after a long day of work, Arif would sit outside his small house and look at the stars. The sky over the village was wide and silent, and in that silence, his mind would wander. He would wonder if his life would always remain the same. He would wonder whether a poor farmer like him could ever rise above his condition. He would wonder if someone like him could ever be truly loved. Most people in the village thought his future would be ordinary. Some said he would simply marry a girl from another poor family, continue farming, and live a life like everyone else. Others believed that dreams were a luxury for people with money. But Arif did not agree. He had never let poverty decide the size of his heart. At the same time, at the other end of the village, far away from Arif's broken house, stood a large mansion surrounded by high walls and polished gates. This was the home of Mr. Karim, one of the wealthiest men in the area. He owned land, businesses, and enough money to make people bow their heads in respect. Inside that house lived his daughter, Nadia. Nadia's life was completely different from Arif's. She lived in comfort. She had elegant clothes, expensive furniture, servants, and a room of her own filled with books, flowers, and mirrors. She never had to worry about food, water, or shelter. Everything in her life seemed perfect from the outside. But wealth has a strange way of hiding loneliness. And Nadia was lonely. Her father was strict and proud. He believed that a family's honor was more valuable than its happiness. Her mother was quiet and obedient, always afraid to say the wrong thing. Her cousin Javed often stayed at the house and acted as though he owned everyone around him. Nadia had people around her all the time, but no one who truly understood her. She felt trapped. From her window, she could see the fields in the distance. She could see the farmers working, the children running, the wind moving across the grass like a living thing. She often stood there for long moments, staring at the world outside her walls and wondering what it would feel like to live freely. What would it be like to walk where she wanted, to speak without fear, to choose her own path? She was beautiful, intelligent, and thoughtful. But in her home, those things were treated as decoration, not strength. Her father wanted her to be obedient. He wanted her to live according to the rules of wealth and tradition. He wanted her future to be arranged, controlled, and safe. Nadia, however, wanted something else. She wanted a life that felt real. One afternoon, while standing by the window, she noticed something unusual in the field near the road. A young farmer was working alone under the harsh sun. He was bending down to pull weeds from the earth. He paused, wiped the sweat from his face, and looked up for a moment. That was when Nadia first saw Arif properly. She could not explain why, but something about him caught her attention. It was not his clothes. It was not his poverty. It was the quiet dignity in the way he moved. He looked tired, but not defeated. He looked poor, but not broken. There was strength in him that did not come from money. It came from struggle. Nadia kept watching him for a while longer than she should have. Then she turned away from the window, but his image stayed in her mind. The next day, she found herself looking again, and then again. Soon, the sight of the young farmer became something she waited for. Arif, of course, did not know he had become the subject of someone's thoughts. He continued his work as usual, unaware that a girl from the grand house was slowly beginning to notice the man behind the mud and sweat. He only knew the field, the sky, the soil, and the endless cycle of labor. But life was already beginning to move in a different direction. One morning, a servant from the Karim house came running toward the fields. He looked worried and was calling the name of a young boy. Nadia had come with her younger brother, and the boy had lost his toy in the grass near the crops. The whole area was searched, but no one could find it. The servant asked the farmers if anyone had seen it. Arif looked up from his work and approached them. "Did something get lost?" he asked politely. The servant explained the situation. Arif listened carefully, then started helping without waiting for anyone to ask twice. He walked through the grass, moved around the ditch, and carefully searched the area. He climbed a small embankment and finally found the toy near a bush. When he returned, Nadia was standing nearby. For the first time, Arif saw her face clearly, and for the first time, Nadia saw his. They looked at each other for a moment that felt longer than it really was. There was no music, no dramatic introduction, no grand event. Just a simple meeting in a village field. But sometimes life changes because of the quietest moments. Arif handed the toy to the servant. "Here," he said, "I found it." Nadia stepped forward and thanked him softly. "Thank you." Arif lowered his gaze respectfully. It was nothing, mem, but it was not nothing. Because that tiny exchange had opened a door neither of them knew existed. Nadia noticed his voice first, calm, gentle, honest. Arif noticed her eyes next, curious, kind, lonely in a way he immediately felt, though he did not understand why. She was about to leave, but for a second she hesitated. Arif stood still, waiting, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. In the end, neither of them said anything more. The moment ended the way all beginnings do, quietly. But after she left, Nadia could not stop thinking about him. And after he returned to his work, Arif could not stop thinking about her. That night, Nadia sat alone in her room, the toy resting on the table beside her brother's books. She found herself remembering the farmer's face. There was nothing flashy about him, nothing impressive to the world's eyes. Yet she felt strangely moved by him. She had met many educated men, many wealthy men, many polished men. None of them had looked at her the way Arif did, with neither greed nor fear. Arif, meanwhile, sat outside his house after dinner, staring at the moon. He replayed the moment in his mind again and again. He knew she was from the rich family. He knew their worlds were far apart, but for reasons he could not explain, her image stayed with him longer than expected. From that day, something invisible began to grow between them. Not love yet, not openly, just awareness, just curiosity, just the first small movement of a story that would one day shake both their lives. Yidi Khan, Ami Ekni Part Duilikidi, Love Beyond Wealth. Part 2, The First Conversation. The next few days passed like any other in the village, but for Arif and Nadia, something had already changed. Their lives had not yet collided fully, but the small moment in the field had left a quiet mark on both hearts. It was strange how one brief meeting could continue living in the mind long after it ended. Arif tried to ignore it. Nadia tried to do the same. Yet both found that the memory returned whenever their thoughts became silent. Arif kept working in the fields, but now, every time he looked toward the Karim house in the distance, his mind wandered. He knew very well that people from their two worlds were not supposed to mix. Rich people in the village usually kept their distance from the poor. They came out of their houses only when necessary, and even then, it was with servants, cars, and folded faces that never truly looked at the people around them. Nadia, however, had looked at him like a real person. That alone was enough to trouble him. Nadia, too, began to notice things she had never paid attention to before. She started watching the fields more often from her room. She noticed the wind moving across the crops. She noticed the farmers laughing to one another while working. She noticed how simple life could be outside the walls of her house. And in the center of that world, she often saw Arif. He never tried to appear important. He never looked toward her house as if he wanted something from it. He simply worked quietly and honestly with the calm dignity of a man who had accepted struggle without surrendering to it. One afternoon, a strange thing happened. Nadia's younger brother again lost something near the fields. This time, it was not a toy, but a little silver ring that had fallen from his hand while he was playing. The servant and a few boys searched everywhere, but nobody could find it. Nadia, who had been standing nearby, suggested that they ask the farmers. Her brother's face had turned worried because he had been afraid of being blamed for losing it. Arif was one of the men they asked. When he heard the story, he nodded and immediately began searching. He did not ask why a rich family's child had been playing near the field. He did not complain about being interrupted from his work. He only crouched down and carefully moved through the grass, looking in every small place where the ring might have fallen. Nadia stood at a short distance and watched him. The afternoon sun made the field bright, and Arif's shadow stretched long across the soil. He searched with patience, moving weeds aside with careful fingers. Unlike many other men, he did not rush. He did not pretend he knew where to look when he did not. He simply kept searching until he found it. After several minutes, Arif lifted the silver ring from the grass. "I found it," he said. The brother ran to him with relief. Nadia stepped forward as well. "Thank you," she said again. Arif looked at her and gave a small, respectful smile. "It was lying in the grass. Anyone could have missed it. But you didn't," Nadia said. For a second, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to go still. The voices of the other boys became distant. The wind seemed softer. It was only a short conversation, but it carried a weight neither of them was prepared to understand. That day, Nadia did not leave immediately after taking the ring. Instead, she remained near the field longer than usual. Her brother ran back to the house, but she stayed behind, pretending to inspect the road. Arif continued working, though he could feel her presence. Finally, after a small silence, she gathered the courage to say something more. "You work here every day." Arif straightened up and looked at her. "Yes, ma'am. This land belongs to my family, at least what is left of it." Nadia nodded slowly. "That must be difficult." Arif gave a short laugh that carried no bitterness, only truth. "Difficult is normal for people like me." Nadia looked down for a moment. She wanted to say something comforting, but no elegant sentence came to mind. She realized then how rare honest conversation was in her life. Most people spoke to her carefully, like she was made of glass. Arif spoke plainly without trying to impress, and that made his words feel more real. "Do you like it?" she asked. "Working here?" "Yes." Arif wiped his forehead with the back of his hand before answering. "I don't know if I like it, but I know it keeps me alive, and sometimes that is enough." Nadia thought about that. "Don't you ever dream of something else?" Arif looked at her, surprised by the question. "Of course I do." "What kind of dream?" He hesitated, then he smiled faintly. "A life where I don't have to count every coin before spending it. A house where rain doesn't enter through the roof. Enough food for every day. Maybe a little peace. Maybe someone who understands me." Nadia listened quietly. She had expected him to say money, land, or power, but he spoke of peace and understanding. That answer stayed with her. "And you?" Arif asked after a pause. Nadia blinked, slightly caught off guard. "What about me? What do you dream of?" She looked away toward the road, as if the answer was too private to speak aloud. I dream of freedom, she said at last. Arif did not interrupt. I dream of choosing my own life. I dream of walking somewhere without someone watching me. I dream of speaking without being told to stay quiet. I dream of becoming a person, not only a daughter. Arif listened carefully. Then he said something simple that affected her more than he could know. Then you are already stronger than you think. Nadia turned toward him. Why would you say that? Because many people spend their whole lives accepting cages without ever noticing them. You know you are trapped. That means part of you is already trying to get out. Nadia had no answer. The truth of his words made her heart feel both lighter and heavier at the same time. That evening, she returned home with a strange feeling she could not explain. For the first time in a long while, someone had spoken to her not as a rich man's daughter, but as a thinking, feeling human being. Arif had not tried to flatter her. He had not pretended to be greater than he was. He had simply told her the truth. And truth, when it arrives after a long silence, feels like a miracle. Over the next several days, their conversations became more natural. Nadia found reasons to pass by the fields. Arif found himself looking up whenever a light carriage or a familiar figure appeared on the road. They began speaking more openly, though still carefully. At first, the topic remained simple things: weather, work, books, the village, family. But slowly, the conversation moved deeper. One day, Nadia asked, "Do people treat you badly because you are poor?" Arif thought about it before answering. Sometimes, people respect wealth more than honesty, but I have learned not to be surprised. Doesn't that hurt? It used to. And now I understand something. What? Arif looked at her with a calm expression. A hungry man learns to live with hunger. A broken man learns to live with pain. But if he keeps his heart clean, the world cannot take everything from him. Nadia repeated those words in her head. A clean heart, she said quietly. Do you really believe that matters? Yes, Arif said, because wealth can be stolen, beauty can fade, power can disappear, but the way a person treats others stays in memory. Nadia lowered her gaze. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. Not one person. Her family taught her about status, respectability, obedience, and class. But Arif spoke of character, dignity, and memory. He made her feel as though the things inside a person were more valuable than the label attached to them. At one point, Arif asked a question that surprised her. Are you happy in that house? The question was so direct that Nadia could only stare at him for a moment. I have everything, she said. That was not my question. Nadia smiled faintly, but the smile was sad. No, she admitted. I am not. Arif nodded as if he had already known. Then why stay silent? She looked at him with quiet pain. Because in my house, silence is the only safe language. Those words stayed between them like an unspoken wound. The sun began to lower, and the orange light spread over the fields. Arif realized that she would soon need to return before her family noticed her absence. He began to step back, but Nadia did not move immediately. She seemed to want to say something more. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. Finally, she asked, Can we talk again? Arif hesitated. He knew the danger. He knew the difference between them was not just about money, but about power, family, expectation, and social shame. Yet something inside him softened whenever she spoke. Yes, he said. If you want to. Nadia nodded. I do want to. Then she turned and walked back toward the house, carrying with her the strange warmth of a conversation she had never expected to have. Arif watched her leave. For the first time in his life, he felt a new kind of fear. It was not fear of poverty. He had always known poverty. It was not fear of work. He had endured work since childhood. This was fear of hope. Because hope is dangerous when it begins to take shape. Because once a person starts believing in something beautiful, losing it becomes possible. And that is where their story truly began. Shaile ek naami part tin likhe di,